All right, we got to talk about this. We got to talk about this. I know. Another one of these videos. If you have not watched my channel previously, then I usually only have one or two of these kinds of videos come out per year. The last one was talking about the Luka trade talk, but that's not really what we're talking about here. We're talking about devastating losses by teams that I happen to be a fan of. I've made two videos about the Dallas Cowboys and their embarrassing playoff performances over the last couple years, last year especially being one of those big ones. But I think last night, watching Duke lose at the hands of the Houston Cougars in the Final Four has to be one of the most devastating things I've ever had to watch in terms of sports in my entire life. I'm lucky to be a Duke fan. I'm lucky to be a Cowboys fan. Well, that's actually up for debate. But with Duke, you know, I've been alive and have had the memory of watching at least two championships in 2010 and 2015. I watched both games. I have watched like probably 95% of Duke games since I can remember. And now I'm at the stage where, like with the Cowboys, there happens to be quite a bit of disappointment with the program. Still fortunate to make the tournament most seasons and make the Elite Eight and Final Four on a pretty good, year-by-year basis. But the way that we lost, or not we, the way that Duke lost that game last night against Houston is one of the most embarrassing ways to lose that you will ever see. So let's talk about it. I want to talk about some plays. I want to talk about the ending of the game. I want to talk about a couple of different players and how they played, and just kind of how the game unfolded from my eyes when I was watching this live last night. I've had some time to think about this and kind of put some notes down, so I think I want to start off by overall talking about rebounding. Now, there is not one thing that lost us this game. It was a multitude of things that kind of happened together on both sides of the ball, offense and defense. But I think rebounding is one of the bigger factors in this loss. Offensive rebounding for Houston especially, we did not box out very well. Coming into this game, I felt confident that we would have the size advantage, but I was worried about Khaman Maluach's, kind of lack of physicality, because if you watch Duke games, if you're a Duke fan or just kept up with the team this season, then you'll probably have noticed that in most Duke games this year, especially when Duke is playing against a very physical team that likes to play through contact and is okay with fouling a little bit more than most teams will, Maluach has really struggled to play in those games. Now, there's been some times where he's played better than we would have thought, but this game, especially against the best defense in the country, Houston being the team to hold teams to the lowest amount of points per game in the season. They had the best defensive rating by KenPom. And you knew that despite, the height disadvantage for Houston, it might not be a disadvantage overall because they're so physical. They're a very strong team, and they're able to play through contact. They're able to really get rid of players that aren't able to play through contact, and Maluach, I think, fits that bill perfectly. These are his stats from this game, or at least the ones that really stand out to me. 0 rebounds in the entire game. 0 rebounds. Don't forget that Maluach is a 7'2" center with a 9'8" standing reach, and he did not come down with a single rebound in this game. How is that even possible? There were several times in this game where a rebound was tipped out by either Duke or Houston, and it was still being bobbled by different players before one team eventually came down with the actual rebound itself. And a lot of the time, it's Maluach who's trying to juggle the ball to himself, kind of, fighting through other big men to get the rebound. But every single time that happened, Malawacz was never the guy that came down with the ball. Not a single time. And he never grabbed a normal rebound on offense or defense. And he ends up with a negative 20 plus minus in this game. Now, plus minuses can be misleading, but in this game, I really don't think it is. Minus 20. He played 21 minutes, so we pretty much lose a point every minute that he was on the court. That is pretty incredible. Difficult to do in a bad way. And I think that is one major factor in this game was Malawacz not rebounding the ball well at all. We'll talk more on the rebounds, specifically in the last 3 minutes in a moment. But I also want to talk about Tyrese Proctor. For those who are not familiar, Proctor has been one of Duke's most reliable options this year. Obviously, Cooper Flagg, Con Knueppel are our two best options, I think, for the offense. But Proctor has had many games with over 20 points, and many games where he has been elite on his three-point shooting. In fact, I believe he came into the game with the tournaments around 40-42% from downtown on the season, coming into the tournaments. And in this game, from the field, he shoots 2 for 8. From 3, he goes 0 for 4, at least 3 of which were wide open looks that he's been knocking down all tournament long, all season long. He's only had maybe a couple other games all year long where he shot as poorly as he did here in this game. And usually in those games, we had somebody else step up in his place and just do better. But in this game, that did not really happen because Houston, again, has a really great defense. And as the game went on, especially in those last 10 minutes, they held Duke to only 1 field goal make in the last 10 minutes of the game. And I think Duke still should have won despite that. But there are more things to add to this. Proctor, again, at the line, goes 3 for 5. And one of those misses came at the very end when Duke was, I believe, in front by a point. And Proctor at the line with a 1-and-1 misses the front end. And they showed this stat earlier in the game when he was at the line in a different stint. But in a tournament, he's only shot like around 50% on free throws. And I believe he shot about 68 or 70% in the regular season. He just has not been reliable at the line, especially in late games. I think if you go back to the last time that Duke played UNC this season, where we only won because of a lane violation by one of the Tar Heel players, Proctor also missed free throws in that game too, if I recall, and they were also crucial misses. And in this game, it continued. He missed one earlier in the game, and every point matters in a game like this. So missing those was obviously really crucial to the game as well. And it sucks because he didn't play well in Duke's last tournament game a year ago in the Elite Eight. And that was a big talking point, was can Proctor kind of turn things around? He's had a very up and down career with Duke. He came in as a reclassified freshman, came in a year early to Duke, had kind of a letdown of a freshman season, thought he had a solid year 2, and then to end last year with the Elite Eight game that he had, it was pretty bad, and then comes back after playing some great tournament games before this one, and then just does not really show up at all. And that is stunning to me because I felt confident, the team looked confident, I had a good feeling going in, despite Houston being so good. And, that's just how it goes sometimes. So that's Malawacz and Proctor, 2 guys that I think, I don't want to, pin the blame on, the players really, because, I do feel bad for them, but, there are guys where, you can kind of point the finger at. I think Sion James is also another player that you can kind of talk about. Transferred from Tulane between last year and this year. I believe Duke had only lost 1 game with James in the starting 5 all year long until this game. I think they were 19-1 or 20-1, because after the first 4 or 5 games of the year, or somewhere in that ballpark, Caleb Foster was taken out of the starting lineup. Sion James was thrown in. He had won the job, and Duke had played way better ever since then. And in this game, unfortunately, he did let Duke down. He shoots 3 for 9, had no points, or at least no field goals in the first half. Had a couple of buckets in the first 10 minutes of the second half, but then kind of went silent the rest of the game, and especially on those inbound plays. Those inbound plays to end the game. All credit to Houston for playing great defense on those, but simply put, the one where he's inbounding it to Cooper Flagg, or at least trying to get it to Cooper Flagg, and then it gets stolen away when Houston is down by, I want to say that was when they were down by 3 or something, and they closed it to a 1-point game. I think that was not the turning point, but it was definitely one that makes your head scratch, because it's just a bad inbound pass. Not only do we have to call timeout on the play prior to that, because we almost got a 5-second call, but he just throws it well short of Cooper Flagg. It's an easy turnover forced by Houston, and they score a couple seconds later, and it is a 1-point game after that, at least if my memory serves me correctly. So Sion James, at least from what I'm seeing here, had a -18 plus minus, so very similar to Kaman Malawach. And the difference, I think, between these two players is that James has actually had a track record of being really good against physical teams. I think that's a big reason why he was brought in, was to make Duke better at being better offensively and getting downhill and finishing at the rim against teams that are going to really challenge you on on-ball defense, which they did in this game. And this time, James did not really show up. I think he went 1 for 4 or 1 for 3 from downtown, which is not great. And he also had some good looks, which he did not really hit. So that was obviously another part of this loss. But then we can talk about Han Knueppel for a little bit. First half, he played great, got the ball, hit a couple big threes, kept Duke in front for the most part alongside Cooper Flagg. And then second half, got some buckets early in the second half, but then we never really got him involved afterwards. I think it was about the 13, 14-minute mark, and after that, Han was really not involved at all, and he should have been. I think he took the second most shots on the team, only behind Flagg, and he was arguably the most efficient scorer out there for Duke, and he did not get involved. Again, credit to Houston's defense for doing a good job at kind of swallowing him up and doing a good job at keeping him from getting the ball. But if your second best offensive player is getting shut down late in the game and you're not getting good play from your role players like Tyrese Proctor and Malawach and Sion James, you can't just rely on Cooper Flagg to carry you the rest of the way. And that is kind of what the game plan was for Duke, was to see what Cooper Flagg could do, which, if you've been watching Duke games, especially earlier this year, then you'll know that the last couple times that we have gone that route of letting Flagg have the ball late in games in a close game, especially against good teams, you'll know that we did not finish those games well at all. And I don't think that Cooper Flagg is the opposite of clutch or whatever. I don't think that he's a choke artist or whatnot. Teams just do play a better defense when it's close and it's late. And they will often have their best defender on Cooper Flagg because they probably think, as we saw Mark Pope think back when Duke played Kentucky earlier this year, that Duke's going to go to Cooper Flagg down the stretch if it's close. They're going to go to him because he's their best player. They're going to go to him to get the best look and the game-winning shot. And that was exactly what Jon Scheyer's game plan was, like it was against Kansas and against Kentucky earlier this year. And we lost both of those games in very similar fashion, at least in the context of the last minute or so of the game. And I thought Flagg got a good look for his last shot. The only thing being is that throughout the entire game, I don't think Flagg hit a single mid-range jumper, and most of those shots were kind of turnaround fades, and those ones were not dropping. He was knocking down his threes. He was knocking down shots at the rim for the most part, but the mid-range shots just weren't falling, and that was the shot that he took. And again, it was a good look over a good defender. He just leaves it short, and that was going to be his Laettner shot if that one would have gone in. But obviously, we know what happened. So I think in the end, one of my problems with the end of that game and that one play specifically is that I think Jon Scheyer needs to drop some better plays, because we've seen really good late game plays drawn up by Scheyer in the middle of the season, and I think he's done a good job having Duke pull away in second halves. We almost pulled away in the middle part of the second half. I think it was a 14-point game with 12 minutes to go or somewhere in that ballpark, or maybe it was 8 to go or something like that. And then just slowly and slowly, Houston chips away, and you could kind of feel everything collapsing in on Duke. And I think they could feel it too. You could kind of see it on their faces. With that Houston run, they didn't really know how to react to it. And I think Jon Scheyer made a really good point in his post-game press conference that he did not do enough to help them win. I think what I kind of saw was a little bit less coaching and more kind of letting the players try to fight through adversity themselves. Obviously, that might not be a fair take because you can't really always see what the coach is doing or saying on the court at any one time, especially hearing what he's saying. But that is kind of what it seemed like to me. So that was also a factor, I think. But one field goal those last 10 minutes, I mean, that just cannot happen. Still should have won regardless of that. But that was a ridiculous stretch, and one that I'm never really going to forget in my entire life, unfortunately. And because I happen to be a Duke fan, obviously the rest of the sports world that watches college basketball, they all hate Duke. Even though this is one of the most likable Duke teams of all time, people hate Duke. And so, like when the Cowboys lose any game, I'm going to have to witness all the reactions on Twitter and whatnot, and just kind of doom scroll for probably days or weeks on end. But a few other things to talk about. I probably won't mention every single thing that led to this Duke loss, but I will try to address all the big points. And here's one right here. In the last 3 minutes and 4 seconds of the game, Houston missed 4 shots. And on those 4 missed shots, they grabbed 4 offensive rebounds. So what does that mean? Simply put, every time Houston missed those last 3 minutes and 4 seconds, they got a second chance. And in this game, they were +7 over Duke on second chance points. That was a really big swing. And there was another big play earlier in the second half, which I'll talk about in a moment. But the amount of offensive rebounds that Duke allowed in this game was simply insane. A part of that was Malawach having 0 and not being physical and not being able to play through the contact because he's not really a bulky guy. He's a very thin 7-footer. But Houston, +7 second chance points, +5 on the offensive glass, at least from what I'm seeing right here. And 4 of those came on 4 misses in the later stages of the game. And if you're not boxing out late in a close game, odds are you're just going to lose the game. You have to rebound. It is one of the most important things you can do in a close game, simply put. So that was obviously key. That was crucial. But there was a big swing, and this was the turning point in this game. I forget what minute mark it was at exactly, but there was a play where LJ Cryer pulls up, kind of running into a 3, knocks it down, and I forget exactly what that cut the game to. I think that cut the game to a 9-point game, but the play wasn't over because right after that, on the inbound, kind of halfway point between the inbound and the shot make, Mason Gillis elbows one of Houston's players in the head, trying to box out for the potential board, and he gets called for a good called technical foul. That gives, I believe it was 1 free throw plus the ball to Houston. They missed the free throw if I recall correctly, but then they hit another 3, I want to say. So it is a 6-point possession right there for Houston. And that cuts the game to 6 points. That cuts Duke's lead in half. And from that point on, it was a complete sweat match. And, you know, I think a lot of people in college basketball media want to talk about how Duke has not really been tested in the ACC this year. And when they have, then they haven't really played that well. And I think there is some validity to that. There is some truth in that, but also not. But I will say, look back at that UNC game. Very, very similar how those games closed out. The only difference being that Duke got, honestly, very lucky against UNC with that lane violation. That was not going to happen in the Final Four against a team as well coached as Houston, especially as well as they were playing coming into this game too. They're a great defensive team, and they are a very level-headed team. They were not going to make mistakes like that down the stretch like UNC did, and this time Duke did not make really any plays down the stretch to win the game. But I think that 6-point swing earlier in that second half was the biggest turning point in the entire game. But also, I want to talk about 3 players that got time in the first half, but not as much in the second half. Malik Brown, Caleb Foster, and Patrick Gongba. So Malik Brown has been working his way back from his shoulder injury, right? And he's still not 100% and was not 100% coming into this game, but he was ready to take on a bigger role, and he played very well when he was out there. I think he shot 2 for 2 with just a couple nice looks, made some good passes, picked up a couple of steals, as he does. That's what he's out there for, is to make offense difficult for Houston, which he did. Had a couple nice strips and all that stuff. The only problem was that he barely played in those last 10 minutes, and Malawach was the guy that closed out the game for Duke. And again, we've already talked about having no rebounds. I think he only had a couple points at the free throw line, plus I think only 1 field goal. I think it was like 1 for 4 or somewhere around there from the field. So I don't understand why we did not move away from Malawach and instead throw in either Brown or Gongba, who is the backup center usually for Malawach over the last 2 or so months of the season. Gongba is a very physical player. He is, I believe, a better on-ball defender overall than Malawach. I think he has less block ability. Still can block shots, don't get me wrong, but he's better on defense overall. Malawach just has the better reach to get those blocks. But Gongba is a physical, strong player, and he barely played in that second half when I think he really should have, because Malawach was getting bullied all game long. And then Malik Brown, of course, not out there for the last 10 or so minutes. Maybe came in for like a short spell or whatnot, but was not given a chance to play in the last few minutes. I think he should have. And then Caleb Foster, who gave Duke a huge spark in the first half just by doing a good job boxing out, playing good defense, and making some good passes, and kind of creating space by slashing inside and kicking the ball back out for good looks. And he played very well in the first half, had a positive plus-minus, and despite not having any points in this game, he still had a good game. But then really barely played in the second half, especially those last 10 minutes. I don't really understand why. Again, I think, I do love Jon Scheyer as a head coach. I think he's a great coach. I think he's been really good all season. But there's been a couple times, especially late, where I think he's made some lapses in judgment. And I think this again ties back into the losses against Kentucky and Kansas. Those really came back in full form. It's kind of a mix between the UNC comeback and the ACC tournaments, and then the very end of the games against Kentucky and Kansas, kind of the mashup of those 3 close games. And I feel like, I hate to say this, but maybe Scheyer and the team did not really learn from those experiences. Obviously, Houston's better than all those teams that we faced in those games, and Duke was a better team coming into this one. But to not win a game like this when it's close, when you haven't really had a lot of close games this season, and the ones that you have had, you've kind of, I think they were 3-3 or 2-4 in those games this season overall, including this loss against Houston. So I think that's just it right there. Not closing games out, not delivering the knockout punch when you're up by 14 points and you have plenty of opportunities to extend that lead and quiet the crowd and quiet Houston, and just did not do it. But that's kind of all I can really say about the game. I don't really have a whole lot more on my mind right now besides absolute despair and heartbreak. And, oh yeah, one more thing. The foul on Cooper Flagg. I've seen a lot of people kind of wanting to blame Duke's loss on that foul call. I think it was a really bad foul call, which obviously gave the Cougars a 1-and-1 at the line with a chance to tie and then take the lead, which they did end up doing. But that was only one part of a larger issue in the final moments of this game, because I feel like even if that play were not to happen, I think Duke still might lose this game anyways, just because of how things were trending. So it was a bad call, obviously, but I don't think it had as large of an impact and is not the immediately responsible play for why Duke lost. So I'm not going to pin that on the call, because you'll have calls like that go your way or the other team's way all the time. I'm not going to blame it on that one play. But all of those things, the offensive rebounding, the no rebounds from Malo Watch, the lack of physicality from Malo Watch, Sion James not shooting well and having struggles on the inbound plays, Tyrese Proctor having a ghost game, 0 for 4 from 3, missing free throws, the inbound plays, the flag, or the foul on Cooper Flagg, Con Canepa not being involved late, Malik Brown, Caleb Foster, Gungba not getting playing time late in that game, and only scoring one field goal the last 10 minutes, I think are all of the biggest factors that played a role in Duke's loss. And unfortunately, it is one of the craziest losses you'll ever see, but I guess that is just March Madness for you. But it's April, so I'm not really sure how that works. But that's all I got. Another disappointing loss by a stumpy, favorited team. But hopefully, this is the last one I'll ever have to make. But it probably isn't. The Cowboys still exist. So I guess that's going to do it for me. Thanks, guys, for watching or listening or whatever. And I'll see y'all next time. Peace out.